Y estamos transmitiendo en vivo desde Miami, Estados Unidos, justamente en Coconogru, donde se produce un acto muy significativo, un debate a favor de Cuba y de no al bloqueo de Estados Unidos a Cuba. Entre los participantes, Rubén Bello, ¿qué opina de este momento que se está produciendo aquí?
Bueno, ya creo que mi cara de felicidad lo dice todo. Esto ha quedado maravilloso. Esto ha sido un acto contundente con el nombre de Cuba en alto, diciendo un no al bloqueo, un no a toda la presión que está poniendo Estados Unidos con Cuba y a toda la presión que está poniendo Estados Unidos a nuestra familia.
Bueno, ayúdame, ¿podemos pasar al interior?
Vamos a pasar ahora para seguir
Muy bien,
viendo
vamos
lo que
a seguir
está pasando.
transmitiendo. Esta es Radio Miami Tesoro en directo.
Esto que
desde
adentro
Miami.
es un cuartico de dignidad, de
Bien.
vergüenza.
Adelante, Rubén. Gracias. Estamos transmitiendo en directo y en vivo.
We were able to visit the Latin American School of Medicine, where students from around the world come to train as doctors, and the only commitment that they make to receive this scholarship is to go home and serve their communities, their barrios, to bring medical care to the people that, to their families and their communities. They exemplify the personal sacrifice that is part of Cuba's spirit of internationalism. And the students, there was one really poignant poem read by a Palestinian student about how homesick he was and how much he missed his mother on the one hand. And on the other hand, how proud and overjoyed he was to be getting this experience in Cuba and how important it was to him. We met with a 70-year-old man who joined the revolutionary forces at age 16. He described not only the economic challenges of the blockade, but the toll that it takes on the consciousness of workers and on the moral fiber of those who are responsible for distributing these scarce goods and commodities. It starts to wear people down. Nonetheless, he assured us that Cuba is moving forward. Slowly, he said, sometimes with missteps and errors, but always forward. Pete and I were assisted with some travel issues by a woman named Luanda, who proudly explained to us that her father gave her the name while he was deployed to Angola to fight the South African apartheid army. Yet another example of Cuba's spirit of internationalism. And then we joined the entire population of Barbosa, which is a municipality near Havana, in a raucous and joyful rally in concert against imperialism. The entire town turned out. The kids, the grandmothers, everybody. So it's no surprise that for the millions whose countries have been decimated by the greed of the transnationals and their local lackeys, Bolsonaros and so forth, Cuba shines as a beacon of hope. Cuba is the proof that working people can organize society to defend their own interests. It's the proof that even a small country can stand up to Washington and its might. And it's the proof that not only is it possible to stand up and to resist, but it is possible to move forward at the same time. Not as fast as they would like, but nevertheless forward. And that optimism really permeates every conversation. The delegates were inspired by the opportunities for change that are apparent around the world. And although there are a lot of different ideas about how each country, each struggle should move forward, there was clear agreement on the need to unify in action in solidarity with Cuba, against the blockade, against U.S. intervention in the affairs of Venezuela, and in solidarity with the many struggles for independence and sovereignty around the globe. Initially, the conference draft resolution called for the removal of the Trump administration as its first point of action. But the Puerto Rican delegation made a compelling argument that Trump is not the problem. The problem is the bipartisan agreement for 60 years on the blockade of Cuba. The problem is bipartisan agreement for more than a century on the colonial status of Puerto Rico. The Cubans made a distinction, and interesting enough, they took this up in Granma on November 1st. This is the issue in English. They have a photo of Obama and a photo of Bush. It says, President Barack Obama exemplified smart power in the White House, while George Bush wielded hard power, both to implement the same imperialist policy. So the final declaration of the conference focused on the fight against those policies rather than against the current gatekeepers of the policy. One big surprise occurred the last day of the conference when we were all seated, everybody was ready to begin debate, and onto the stage walked the presidents of both Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, and of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. In his speech, Maduro noted the rising popular struggle that has changed the landscape in Latin America. And he said there are differences of opinion about how to move forward. What should we be fighting for? But that those differences of opinion are like the differences of opinion that happen in a family. We're a family, we disagree with each other about things, but when push comes to shove, we stick together. And that was his description of the atmosphere that we need to create to be able to fight forward. Díaz-Canel explained that there are many who have made or are attempting to make inroads against the worst effects of neoliberal policies, even in the framework of capitalist rule. Bolivia, for example, where they've been able to mitigate some of the harshest effects of these policies. Invariably, those who do this, like Lula in Brazil, have become targets themselves. And Cuba, he said, stands in solidarity with all of these fighters. Díaz-Canel also expressed his appreciation for the number of young people who were among the delegates, who reflected the leadership being taken by youth in many struggles. And I'm sure most of you know that the current uprising in Chile was inspired and initiated or sparked by high school students who took to the street demanding an end to there was an increase in by 30 centavos of the transit fares. It was a spark that woke up the Chilean people, and that was the slogan of the Chilean delegates, was Chile despertó. That after 30 years, Chile has woken up. So this is a historic moment that we're living through. It's filled with opportunities, and it's also fraught with dangers. The foundations of imperialism are being shaken, and we know that any animal under attack does what? Attack back. In addition, the current political landscape, it was pointed out in the United States, is filled with mouthpieces for both parties, jockeying to be seen as the person most capable of continuing the decades-long campaign against Cuba and reinforcing the underpinnings of imperialism's world order. When you look at foreign policy, the foreign policy debate, there isn't much debate. There's agreement by all these parties on the road forward. So we here in the belly of the beast have a special responsibility to work together to end the blockade of Cuba, to fight to allow the Cuban people to continue to march forward. And we have an interest in defending the right of Cuban Americans to conduct normal family relations, and in defending our right to travel as U.S. citizens, as was pointed out, wherever we want to go. It's a right and it's a necessity in the world today. In that fight, the U.S. working class is not immune from the ravages of this social crisis that's taking place in the world. Economic stagnation, crumbling infrastructure, healthcare, education, You talk to workers about deregulation in the U.S. about deregulation and privatization, they know what you're talking about. So we have to find those workers and bring them closer to their brothers and sisters around the world, to help them to see that the fight in Cuba is our fight. The fight to defend Venezuela's sovereignty is our fight. The fight for independence in Puerto Rico is our fight. And that's the job that we have before us. We owe it to the people of the world who are putting their lives on the line every day to carry this forward. So as the Cubans say, we won't sell out, we won't give in. No se vende, no se rinde. Cuba sí, bloqueo no.
To our women speakers, I'd like to call Roxana Fuentes to the room. Roxana is an activist, the Hands Up Venice Coalition, and she's going to introduce a very special message that we received for our meeting.
Rafael Diéguez. He is a member of the National Party, and he's also an activist, and he's been fighting towards the independence of Puerto Rico for many years now. He's 89 years old, and in 1954 he was sent to prison. And he was released by pardon between an agreement between the Cuban government and the United States under James Carter. He wrote a letter. He couldn't be here, so he wrote a letter to us, and I'm going to read a little bit of that letter. He says, "I would be honored and pleased to attend the activity in support of Cuba and Venezuela, since I feel the same way about both countries as you. Unfortunately, there is a problem. I have always traveled using my driver's license and birth certificate, documents that identify me as what I am, Puerto Rican. I have never used a passport, and now the Puerto Rican driver's license is no longer accepted as ID to board flights to the U.S. They will accept a new license that identifies the traveler as a U.S. citizen, which I am not." So he also sent a video because he couldn't be here. So, would you like to take a video?
Is there a way to look the lights? Does anybody know? Is that perfect?
Solidaridad militante con el pueblo de Cuba y el pueblo de Venezuela. Defender a esos dos pueblos es defender a toda Latinoamérica, porque el abuso imperialista contra ellos es el mismo abuso imperialista que quieren defender a todos nuestros pueblos. Sabemos la historia del imperio contra Latinoamérica. Sabemos que en el 1965 la Marina de Guerra norteamericana invadió a Santo Domingo, matando más de 8.000 dominicanos. En el 89 invadieron a Panamá, matando más de 3.000 panameños. Sabemos de las operaciones que hicieron en Chile cuando mataron a Salvador Allende, pusieron a Pinochet. Sabemos cómo Rey Henry Kissinger dirigió aquella obra que llamaban Operación tal que no recuerdo el nombre, que costó miles de vidas latinoamericanas. Así que defendiendo a Cuba y Venezuela contra esos abusos, estamos defendiendo aún a los latinoamericanos que viven dentro de las entrañas del imperialismo. Todos, donde quiera que esté uno de nosotros, le afecta el trato a nuestra gente, ya sea dentro o fuera del imperialismo norteamericano. Quiero darle las gracias al grupo Manos Fuera de Cuba, porque realmente manos fuera de Latinoamérica, de la patria grande de que habló Simón Bolívar. En Puerto Rico, esperamos que no conviertan a ningún pueblo nuestro en otro Puerto Rico. Ustedes saben que tienen, yo les puedo enviar una lista de los 25 poderes absolutos que tienen sobre nosotros. ¿Y saben cuál es el número 25 dicho por ellos? Que nos pueden vender o canjear a cualquier país del mundo sin siquiera nuestro consentimiento. Si eso no es esclavitud, ¿qué es esclavitud? ¿Ve? Dicen que somos propiedad. Yo no quiero ser parte de ellos jamás. No de los que han abusado y han humillado a mi gente. A eso yo los combato mientras yo viva, por mi propia dignidad de puertorriqueño. ¿Ve? Pero que sepamos nuestra historia, para que conozcamos el peligro que se cierne sobre todos nosotros si no luchamos. Solo luchando y uniéndonos podemos convertirnos en una fuerza que pueda confrontar a la perversidad del imperialismo, que no tiene escrúpulos, Así que vuelvo y repito mis gracias a todos aquellos que están luchando por todos nosotros, por nuestros hijos, por nuestro futuro. Les doy las gracias. Aquí en Puerto Rico, que nos bombardearon desde alta mar el 12 de mayo de 1898, la Marina de Guerra norteamericana dirigida por Sampson, por un fulano tal Sampson, almirante Sampson, matándonos en nuestras casas, en las calles, casi destruyendo el santuario de San José. La vez que esterilizaron a miles y miles de nuestras mujeres puertorriqueñas, sepamos eso, no lo olvidemos, incluyendo en el Lincoln Hospital en Nueva York, que era donde iban puertorriqueños y puertorriqueñas. Nos esterilizaron. Y podemos sacar otra historia cuando nos metían cáncer en el cuerpo para acabar con nosotros. La lista sería larga. La lista sería larga. Y solo alguien que quiera ser ciego por su conveniencia no lo puede ver. Pero ustedes lo están viendo. Gracias, mi gente, y para adelante siempre, que luchando se llega, y con voluntad y corazón, y ustedes lo tienen. Muchas gracias.
Very soon. It's going to take over sharing our discussion period, but I wanted to just make some introductions and thank yous before we begin. So first of all, I wanted to recognize Lira Escobar. Has been a very active member of the coalition. I'd like to also thank her family, a family that has taken on video recording of this meeting, so that it will be available to many people who are very inspired by the work that we're doing in Miami to tell the truth about the blockade of Cuba. Here, as was mentioned by Lorenzo, is a candidate for the 25th District of Congress in the Democratic Party primary. So I'd like to give her the floor for a few minutes to greetings to you.
I've got chips on my teeth, so I'm sorry. Anyways, Thank you so much for the introduction, Lorenzo. I think it's really important that we remember, yes, that we can't give up on our elections, because a lot of times people get a little bit cynical and they decide that it's not worth going to the ballot. You know, they give up, and you can never give up, because that's what the elites want. They want us, the civilians, the citizens, the average Joes, to just ignore the process altogether so they win. They want low voter participation. And even though it sometimes feels like you have to vote for the lesser of two evils between the Dems or the Democrats, I'm sorry, the Dems or the Republicans. No, let's not make a fuss about that. The thing is, you can't ever give up, because the fact that Obama was able to somewhat in the last year, it would have been better if he'd done it early on, but it's true. It's very difficult to do any of these things, but he did go to Cuba. He did make it easier for American tourists to exercise their freedom of movement. All of these things, they used to be extremely radical, but they're becoming more mainstream on the streets where real people are talking. Because the problem that we have in South Florida is that the majority of us, we think a certain way, yet the minority political elites, they continue to operate in their own selfish way. They make a lot of noise, and they pull very unpopular stunts, like this one, like the recent hostility towards Cuban families, because they're complacent, because they're comfortable, and they assume that we're not going to do anything about it. And one of the reasons why I wanted to run was because the list is very long. There are many issues that need to be fixed. One of the reasons is that as a Cuban American, I am sick and tired of being tossed around as part of a Cuban family. Cliche sometimes. I've been told that my family and I, that we're just like the classic caricature of a Cuban family, because I am the daughter of a political prisoner in Cuba, and we came here with nothing. We had our small family of four in 1994. We had in our possession a couple of pennies, nickels. We were forced to leave those at the Havana airport. But we believe that Cuban families should no longer be tossed around between the two parties of the moment for electoral purposes. It is wrong, and it is stupid as well, because a lot of times we talk about the emotional, the humane reason, but no, the math, if you look at it, we are affecting the South Florida economy. The last war in Iraq cost us around, with Bush, cost us around $3 trillion. If we had used that money to invest, for instance, in our infrastructure, we would have created decent jobs. And that's the problem from an American perspective, if we don't bear in mind, obviously, the humane reasons and the big bleeding liberal heart reasons, right? If we look at it from a pragmatic and smart point of view of balancing the budget, we're bleeding money, and we're only doing one thing in terms of the foreign policy, creating more and more enemies. So it's insane to continue a habit, a governing habit that doesn't benefit neither the people that we invade, because yes, with Cuba, we haven't had any physical military presence, but the hostility in terms of the rhetoric it amounts to the same thing. And we all know that wars start with words at one point. And the embargo is punishing Cuba. And if we sanction so many countries, like Cuba, Venezuela, Iran, all these countries, if we continue to sanction the countries that just don't want to bow down and adopt a different economic and political model, we're eventually sanctioning ourselves. We're refusing to do business with them. I thought we believed in free markets. I thought it was the smart capitalist thing to try and invade other markets. What, we don't want to do business with Cuba? All right, if you get yourself out of the picture, China and Russia are going to take over. So I think that if we wanted to continue being the world's superpower, to try and do good, I think it makes a lot of sense to rethink the strategies of regime change. Regime change does not work. And if enough people hear our message, they will go out and vote. Because it's not that we don't have the numbers. We are the majority, because this is common sense. We're creating enemies afar. South American people can see right through these policies, and we are alienating ourselves, creating enemies everywhere, just wasting taxpayer dollars in, for instance, funding a propaganda machinery from the Cold War. We have Radio and TV Marti that recently a couple of the same people as always, Rubio, Rick Scott, Ballard, they're trying to save it when that needs to be at least reformed. Radio and TV Marti needs to turn, if we're going to continue to fund them, because it's our taxes that's funding this, if they want to continue to exist in District 25, then they better get with the program and actually do some journalistic work, not propaganda. Propaganda that I continue to insist throughout the ages is violating American laws, because we cannot have a propaganda machinery influencing American citizens. And they do this by buying local paid programming spaces. We shouldn't be able to access their website, and they shouldn't be advocating and supporting internal candidates. Radio and TV Marti they recently lost their director, and they had to throw out a couple of these journalists because they were engaging in anti-Semitism. And they create these editorial pages saying that, oh, Bernie's a socialist and AOC, the socialists are taking over America. Well, you can say all you want, you can have those opinions, sure, but you better do it as a private entity. You can't do that as a public entity influencing American voters in South Florida. And so to sum it up, because yes, I was just issued the Time letter. Just yesterday, we were having as a family a conversation through social media to a family member of ours in Cuba. And one of the reasons why I wanted to wear these pearl earrings is not an ode to the 80s, but because they were given to me by a family member in Cuba who yesterday very explicitly said that people are dying. It's not that, oh, they're gonna maybe be pressured into desperation as the original purpose of the embargo. People are literally dying in Cuba. And it's through the most absurd ways, through either loss of penicillin, access to antibiotics, the simplest 19th century medicine, it's missing. So this isn't going to bring about a regime change. We're not going to be able to install a neoliberal society there according to our political elite's wishes. Through this method, this will only harm the Cuban civil society because it gives another reason for the Cuban government to say, well, look at America, do you understand why we can't let you have access